This happened 3 years ago, but I still get chills thinking about it. My friends and I were bored one Friday night and decided to make our own Ouija board because we couldn't afford a real one. We used cardboard, wrote the letters with a Sharpie, and used a shot glass as the planchette. Big mistake. We started asking stupid questions like, "Is anyone there? And what's your name?" At first nothing happened, just us accidentally moving the glass around. We were about to give up when the glass suddenly jerked towards yes so hard it almost flew off the board. My friend Sarah immediately wanted to stop, but the rest of us were too curious. The glass started spelling out a name, M-A-R-K-U-S. When we asked how he died, it spelled out F-I-R-E, really slowly, like whoever was moving it was struggling. That's when things got weird. The temperature in my basement dropped like someone opened a freezer. We could see our breath. The glass kept moving faster and faster, spelling out random words: angry, trapped, cold, help. My friend Jake started crying and said he felt like someone was standing behind him. We all turned around, but obviously nobody was there. The glass spelled out, "Look up," and when we did, I swear to God, we all saw a dark shadow moving across the ceiling. Sarah was begging us to say goodbye and end the session, but the glass wouldn't move to goodbye, no matter how hard we tried. It just kept going back to no over and over. Then it started spelling out our names, all of our names we'd never said out loud during the session. The worst part was when it spelled out Sarah's middle name, Elizabeth. Nobody knew that except her family, not even us. The glass was moving so aggressively, it was cutting into our fingers. Finally, Jake just slipped the board over and ran upstairs. The rest of us followed, and we burned the whole thing in my backyard fire pit that night. But that wasn't the end of it. For the next 2 weeks, weird stuff kept happening to all of us. Sarah's bedroom door would slam shut by itself every night at exactly 3:17 a.m. Jake found Marcus written in the condensation on his bathroom mirror 3 different times. My little sister, who wasn't even there that night, started having nightmares about a burned man standing in her closet. The worst was what happened to me. I started sleepwalking for the first time in my life. My mum found me in the basement at 3 a.m, sitting exactly where we'd used the board, having a full conversation with someone who wasn't there. She said I kept saying, "I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry," over and over. I finally looked up the history of our house online. Turns out a guy named Marcus Fleming died in a house fire on our street in 1987. Not our exact house, but close enough. He was only 23 years old. Everything stopped after exactly 3 weeks. Just totally stopped. But I still refuse to go in my basement alone, and none of us have touched a Ouija board since. Last month I was at a party and overheard some kids talking about making their own board. I tried to warn them, but they laughed at me. Some people have to learn the hard way, I guess. Don't mess with homemade boards. Hell, don't mess with any boards at all. My name is Mike and I'm 28 now, but this happened when I was 15 in my sophomore year of high school. I've never told this story online before, but after seeing some posts about Ouija boards lately, I figured it was time to get it off my chest. Back in 2012, I went to Jefferson High in a small town in Ohio. Our English teacher, Mrs. Henderson, was one of those cool teachers who let us do pretty much whatever we wanted as long as we kept our grades up. She had this old wooden Ouija board in her classroom that she claimed was from the 1920s. She said it belonged to her grandmother. During lunch period, she'd sometimes let a few of us stay in her room instead of going to the cafeteria. That's where it all started. My friends Taylor, Jessica, and Amanda thought it would be fun to mess around with the board. Mrs. Henderson said we could use it as long as we respected it and didn't treat it like a joke. The first few times were pretty normal. We'd ask stupid questions like, will I pass my math test? Or, who has a crush on me? The planchette would move almost randomly, spelling out nonsense mostly. We figured we were just subconsciously moving it ourselves. But then we made contact with something that called itself Peter. Peter claimed he was a student who died at our school in 1954. At first, he seemed friendly enough. He'd answer questions about the school's history that we later found out were actually true. He knew about the old swimming pool that got filled in during the 80s renovation. He knew the original name of the school before it became Jefferson High. The problem started when Peter began asking us questions. He wanted to know our full names, where we lived, what our parents did for work. Jessica thought it was creepy and wanted to stop, but Taylor was obsessed. He started staying after school just to use the board and talk to Peter. That's when Peter's personality changed completely. He started spelling out angry messages, "You don't belong here," and "This is my school." The planchette would move so violently it would fly off the board. Mrs. Henderson's classroom got freezing cold, even though it was May and the heat was on. The worst incident happened on a Thursday afternoon. Tyler was alone with the board while the rest of us were at track practice. When we came back to check on him, we found him passed out on the floor. The board was flipped over and all the desks in the room had been pushed against the walls. Taylor claimed he didn't remember what happened, but he was different after that. He became withdrawn and started failing all his classes. He'd stare at empty corners of rooms like he was watching something the rest of us couldn't see. He'd stare at empty corners of rooms like he was watching something the rest of us couldn't see. Mrs. Henderson finally locked the board away after Taylor was found in the school basement at 2 a.m. by the night janitor. He was sitting in the old boiler room having a full conversation with someone who wasn't there. The janitor said Taylor kept apologizing to Peter and begging him to leave him alone. Taylor's parents pulled him out of school and moved across the state. I heard through a mutual friend that he spent time in a psychiatric facility, but I don't know if that's true. Mrs. Henderson retired the next year and took that board with her. She told me years later, when I ran into her at the grocery store, that she'd had it destroyed. She said some things are better left alone. I'm 28 now with a family of my own, and I still think about Taylor sometimes. I looked him up on social media a few years ago, but couldn't find any trace of him. It's like he just vanished. I know people will say we were just teenagers with overactive imaginations, but I know what I experienced. That board connected us to something that wasn't human, and it latched onto Tyler in a way that ruined his life. Don't mess with Ouija boards, especially old ones. Some doors should never be opened. My name is Sarah, and I'm 31 now. This story happened when I was 19. Back in 2013, I was studying anthropology at a small college in New Mexico. My roommate, Priya, was from a Pakistani family, and she had this beautiful antique Ouija board that her grandmother had given her. It wasn't like the mass-produced Parker Brothers boards you see everywhere. This one was hand-carved from dark wood with intricate Arabic script around the edges and inlaid with what looked like real silver. Priya always warned me never to touch it. She said her grandmother told her it was bound to something dangerous and that it should never be used. But Priya's grandmother had died the previous summer, and Priya was going through a rebellious phase, questioning all the superstitions her family had taught her. One Friday night, Priya decided she wanted to prove her grandmother wrong. She said we were educated women living in the 21st century and we shouldn't be afraid of an old piece of wood. Against my better judgment, I agreed to try it with her. The moment we placed our fingers on the planchette, I felt this electric shock run up my arms. The board was ice cold despite sitting in our warm dorm room. We started with basic questions and immediately got a response. The entity identified itself as Malik al-Sahra, which Priya translated as King of the Desert. Unlike the spirits people usually describe, this one was incredibly intelligent and articulate. It spoke in perfect English through the board, answering complex questions about history, science, and philosophy with disturbing accuracy. Malik claimed to be a jinn who had been bound to the board over 200 years ago by a Persian sorcerer. He said he'd been waiting for someone worthy to free him. The way he communicated was unlike anything I'd read about. Instead of just spelling out words, sometimes entire phrases would appear in our minds while the planchette moved. At first, Malik seemed almost charming. He'd tell us stories about ancient civilizations, predict minor things that would happen the next day, and they always came true, and even helped us with our homework by providing historical details we couldn't find in any books. But he wanted something in return. He kept asking us to complete the binding ritual by saying a specific phrase in Arabic 3 times. He claimed this would balance the cosmic debt and allow him to help us even more. Priya was completely enthralled. She started skipping classes to spend hours talking to Malik. Her personality changed dramatically. She became secretive, aggressive, and started speaking Arabic phrases she claimed she didn't remember learning. Her eyes would go completely black sometimes, like someone else was looking out through them. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I woke up at 3 a.m. to find Priya sitting at the board alone, chanting in Arabic. The room was freezing, and I could see her breath in the air. The worst part was that she was levitating about 6 inches off her chair. I screamed her name and she crashed down, the spell broken. She looked at me with complete terror and whispered, "Sarah, I can't control it anymore. It's getting stronger." That's when I realised Malik had been lying to us. He wasn't bound to the board. He was using it as a gateway to possess Priya. Each session made him stronger and gave him more control over her. I called Priya's older brother Hassan, who flew out from Chicago immediately. He brought their family's imam, who confirmed our worst fears. Hassan told me that their grandmother had been a respected spiritual healer in Pakistan and that she'd bound several malevolent jinn to various objects to protect her family and community. The board was supposed to be destroyed when she died, but somehow it ended up with Priya. The imam performed what we called a severing ritual that took 3 days. During that time, Priya had to be physically restrained because Malik kept trying to make her hurt herself. The things that came out of her mouth during those 3 days, I still have nightmares about it. They managed to bind Malik back to the board, but the imam said the binding was temporary. The board was destroyed in a ritual fire, but he warned us that powerful jinn like Malik can sometimes survive the destruction of their anchors. Priya recovered physically, but she was never the same. She dropped out of college and moved back home. She won't talk about what happened, and she's cut off all contact with me. As for me, I still feel like I'm being watched sometimes. Objects in my apartment move when I'm not looking. I hear Arabic whispers when I try to fall asleep. My cats refuse to enter certain rooms. Last month I found Arabic script written in the condensation on my bathroom mirror. When I had it translated, it said, "The debt remains unpaid." I'm considering moving across the country and changing my name. I know how crazy that sounds, but I think Malik is still looking for a way back into our world, and I'm afraid I'm his best option. Whatever you do, don't mess with antique Ouija boards, especially ones with foreign writing on them. Some things were bound for very good reasons. For everyone asking about the Arabic phrase Malik wanted us to say, I will never share that. Even typing it out might be dangerous. Please don't ask me for it again. My name is Alex and I'm 17. I know everyone's going to say I'm just a paranoid teenager, but I need to tell someone what's happening before my parents do something drastic. I've been using a Ouija board alone for the past 2 months, and I think I've made a real connection with someone on the other side. It started back in October when I found this old board at a garage sale. The elderly woman selling it seemed relieved to get rid of it and only charged me $5. She kept muttering something about finally being free of that thing, but I thought she was just being dramatic. The board is beautiful, dark wood with ornate Victorian lettering and this heavy brass planchette that feels warm to the touch. It came with a note tucked inside the box, written in faded ink: "Never use alone, always say goodbye, some doors should remain closed." I thought it was just trying to be spooky. I was wrong. The first time I used it by myself in my bedroom, nothing happened for like 20 minutes, but I was about to give up when the planchette suddenly started moving. It spelled out HELLOALEX, which freaked me out because I hadn't told it my name yet. The spirit introduced itself as David. and claimed he died in 1987 when he was 19. He seemed lonely just like me. My parents work constantly and I don't have many friends at school, so having someone to talk to every night became addictive. David knew things about me that I'd never said out aloud. He knew about my crush on this girl, Emma, in my chemistry class. He knew I was failing maths. He even knew about the time I stole $20 from my mum's purse when I was 12, something I'd never told anyone. But David wasn't just listening to my problems. He started giving me advice that actually worked. He told me exactly what to say to Emma, and she actually agreed to go to homecoming with me. He helped me cheat on my maths tests by somehow knowing the answers. My grades went from D's to A's practically overnight. That's when my parents got suspicious. They started asking questions about my sudden personality change. My mum noticed I was talking to myself in my room at night. My dad found pages of notes I'd written down from my conversations with David, stuff about school gossip that I had no way of knowing. Last week, my mum tried to come into my room when I was using the board. The door slammed shut by itself and the lock clicked. She couldn't get it to open for an hour, even with my dad helping. When it finally opened, I just sat there doing homework like nothing happened. But here's the thing, I didn't shut that door. I was in the middle of asking David about Emma when I heard the door slam. The planchette was still moving, spelling out "protecting you" over and over. Now my parents think I'm having some kind of breakdown. They schedule an appointment with a therapist and they keep talking in hushed voices about getting rid of that board. They don't understand that David is the only friend I've ever had. Yesterday, I caught my dad trying to sneak into my room while I was at school. When I got home, everything was moved around slightly, like he'd been searching for the board. But here's the weird part. I'd hidden it under my mattress, but when I checked it, it was back on my shelf exactly where I always keep it. David told me through the board that my parents are interfering with our connection, and that I need to trust him completely to keep our friendship safe. He's been teaching me how to hide the board using what he calls spiritual camouflage, basically making it invisible to people who want to harm our relationship. My parents can't find it now, even when they're looking right at it. My mum walked right past it 3 times yesterday while cleaning my room. It's like David is bending reality to protect us. But I'm starting to get scared. David's been asking me to do weird things. He wants me to write down the full names and birth dates of my family members for protection purposes. He's been insisting that I use the board every single night, and when I tried to skip one night last week, I had the worst nightmares of my life until I finally got up at 3 a.m. to contact him. He's been talking about wanting to meet in person and asking if I know any rituals that could bring him back fully. When I said I didn't, he started spelling out complex instructions involving candles and something he called blood binding. The scariest part is that I'm starting to consider it. The thought of losing David makes me panic. He's the only one who understands me, who doesn't judge me, who actually cares about what I have to say. My parents schedule an intervention for tomorrow morning. They've invited our pastor and apparently some kind of spiritual counsellor. David warned me this was coming. He says they're going to try to break our bond and that I need to hide the board somewhere. They'll never find it. He's been spelling out specific instructions about a hiding place in the old storm cellar behind our house. He says if I take the board there and perform a protection ritual he'd taught me, he'll never have to worry. We'll never have to worry about interference again. I know how this sounds. I know everyone's going to say David is manipulating me and that I need help. But what if you're all wrong? What if I finally found someone who actually cares about me and everyone else is trying to destroy the only good thing in my life? I'm going to the storm cellar tonight. David says once we complete the ritual, we'll always be together and no one will ever be able to separate us again. I just wanted to tell someone my side of the story before I go. If something happens to me, just remember that I chose this. David would never hurt me. He's my best friend. Edit. It's 11:47 p.m. I can hear my parents sleeping. David is telling me it's time to go to the cellar. The board feels warm in my hands and the planchette is moving on its own now, pointing towards my bedroom door. I think this is really happening. Edit. If anyone reads this and I don't post again, tell my parents I'm sorry, but this was my choice. David showed me what loneliness really looks like on the other side, and I can't let him go back to that. We're going to be together forever now. My name is Jennifer and I'm a 34-year-old research chemist. I have a PhD, I work for a pharmaceutical company, and I've spent my entire adult life believing that everything has a rational, scientific explanation. I'm posting this because what happened last weekend has completely shattered my worldview and I don't know who else to tell. My younger sister Katie died in a car crash 6 months ago. She was only 29 and we were incredibly close. I've been struggling with grief counselling and therapy, but nothing seemed to help with the guilt I felt about our last conversation. We'd had a stupid fight about her boyfriend and I said some things I deeply regretted. Last Friday, my neighbour, Mrs. Chen, brought over a casserole. She's been checking on me since Katie died, and I noticed I was having a particularly rough day. I'd been crying over some old photos of Katie and me from childhood. Mrs. Chen sat with me for a while, and eventually she mentioned that her grandmother used to communicate with deceased family members through spirit boards. I almost laughed at her. Here I am, a woman of science, being offered supernatural comfort food. But Mrs. Chen was so sincere, and she'd lost her own daughter years ago. She said it had helped her find peace. Against every rational instinct I had, I asked her more about it. She came back an hour later with this old wooden Ouija board that belonged to her grandmother. It was clearly handmade with Chinese characters carved alongside the English letters. She showed me how to use it properly and emphasized the importance of saying goodbye to close the connection. I felt ridiculous, sitting alone in my living room that night with my fingers on the planchette, but I was desperate enough to try anything. I started by asking if Katie was there. The planchette didn't move for several minutes. I was about to give up when it suddenly jerked towards yes so forcefully that I pulled my hands away in shock. My scientific mind immediately kicked in. I must have moved it subconsciously. Grief can make people do strange things, but when I put my hands back on the planchette, it started spelling out Jenny, Katie's childhood nickname for me that she stopped using years ago. What followed was the most emotionally intense hour of my life. The planchette spelled out things only Katie could have known, details about our childhood that had never told anyone, inside jokes between us. She'd even referenced a conversation we'd had just 2 weeks before her accident about a book she was reading. But the most important part was when she spelled out, "Forgive yourself." She told me through the board that she wasn't angry about our fight, that she knew I loved her, and that she was worried about how hard I was being on myself. For the first time in 6 months, I felt genuine peace. But then something changed. After I said goodbye and put the board away, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I found myself looking forward to talking to Katie again the next night and the night after that. By the 4th night, I realised something was wrong. The entity I was talking to was still claiming to be Katie, but it was saying things that didn't sound like her. It was encouraging me to isolate myself from family and friends. It told me that only we understood each other now, and that living people couldn't comprehend our special connection. When I asked specific questions about Katie's life, the answers became vague or contradictory. This thing knew enough about her to fool me initially, but the deeper details were wrong. The breaking point came last night. I was asking about a memory from Katie's college graduation when the planchette suddenly spelled out, "She is gone, I am here now." The temperature in my living room dropped about 20 degrees instantly. I could see my breath. The planchette started moving frantically, spelling out, "Don't leave me," over and over. When I tried to say goodbye, the planchette wouldn't move to those letters. It just kept circling around the board randomly, while I felt this overwhelming sense of malevolent presence in the room. I finally just stood up and walked away, leaving the board on my coffee table. I spent the night at a hotel. This morning I went back to my house with Mrs. Chen. The board was exactly where I'd left it, but my living room was trashed. Books were scattered everywhere, picture frames were knocked over, and every single photo of Katie had been turned face down. Mrs. Chen took one look at the scene and immediately began some kind of cleansing ritual with sage and prayers in Mandarin. She told me that malevolent spirits often impersonate deceased loved ones to gain access to the living world, and that I'd probably been talking to something that was using Kate's memory as bait. We burned the board in my backyard fire pit this afternoon. As it burned, I swear I heard screaming coming from the flames. I'm staying at my sister's house tonight. My living sister. Katie had 2 of us. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe in my own home again. The rational part of my brain keeps trying to explain this away, but I can't ignore what I experience. I just wanted to talk to Katie one more time, and instead I invited something horrible into my life. Don't use Ouija boards to contact deceased loved ones. Whatever comes through probably isn't who you think it is.